All right, everybody, at this point, we're going to get started. I feel it's fair to say that, this late into the event, a lot of people might be getting tired, so totally socially acceptable if you need to go in the back, do some jumping jacks. We have some coffee if you need to wake up. Judgment-free zone, so whatever you have to do to stay awake for this. Do you want me to announce that you're going to dance? We're going to have Nicholas do some dancing. All right, guys, let's get settled down here. So thank you so much for joining us. My name is Logan Bogesfang. I'm one of the student chairs here, joined with Dia, Jeb, Nicholas, everyone else that is fantastic and just made this happen. So a huge thank you to the student leaders, huge thank you to the faculty, and huge thank you to the students that could all be here today. So just super excited. And just to set the tone for this, the next hour, it's going to be super conversational. I want you guys to know as the audience that at the end, we're going to save about 15 to 20 minutes for open questions. So if you have any questions as we're going throughout this conversation, please feel free to write them down, and we'll definitely make sure we get back to those. And then for you guys, so again, super conversational. If somebody on the panel says something that you want to build off of, or you have a follow-up question, please feel free to have conversations amongst yourself. That's really what this is for. So just getting started, I'd love to, I guess we have everyone's names up here. So we're joined with Rebecca. She is our Digital Matters Director here at the library. So super grateful to have her. And if you could start us off, we'll go in order here. If you could start us off and just maybe give us some more details about your role.
Okay, great. It's already on. So I'll just also echo the thanks to all the students who planned this. I've already had so much fun and so many amazing conversations today. So I really appreciate being here and being included in this. So like you just heard, my name's Rebecca Cummings. I'm the Director of Digital Matters here in the Marriott Library. Digital Matters is our digital humanities center here on campus. And so we kind of do two things. One, we help with technology for people who are doing arts and humanities research. If they want to include, more different methods into their research, we help them with technology and connect them to all the amazing resources we have here in the library. But we also do a thing that I find even more interesting, which is turning a humanistic lens on technology, thinking about the social and ethical implications of technologies like AI. So something relevant to what we're talking about today that I did over the summer was run a summer institute for higher education faculty called Humanities Perspectives on Artificial Intelligence. We flew humanists out from all over the country to talk about things like bias and privacy and labor, and it was so fantastic. So my brain is like bursting with thoughts. So thank you.
We're super happy to have you. We're also joined with Penny. She is the Director of Research and Science here at the U. And Penny, if you could please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yes, I'm Penny Atkins. As Logan mentioned, I am the Director of Research and Science at our Scientific Computing and Imaging Institute, or the SKI Institute here on campus. We house the 1U Responsible AI Initiative, and so that is a program that was initially launched from our university president back in October of 2023, really focused on how we can both advance the technology itself, but mostly focusing on that societal impact. So how do we do things in areas like environment, healthcare and wellness, and teaching and learning to ensure that we're making true societal impact with our AI advancements. And so with that program, we've had a number of different ways that we've engaged across campus. We host distinguished visitors who give seminars that are open to everyone. We brought in a couple of the fellows for the recent Humanities Institute over the summer. We also have faculty fellows and postdoctoral fellows that are part of our program. And we do a lot of community events. So we have a community consortium that we've launched and a number of different special interest groups focused on things like education and workforce development, or even AI policy, so integrating with folks across the state. That being said, I'm sure Manish has some other words to add on to me. I work very closely with Manish, so yeah, I think that gives a quick summary of me at least.
Oh, that's way cool. It's definitely incredibly exciting stuff. Now we're going to hear from Jim. Jim is a associate professor.
Good afternoon. Jim Agutter, and in addition to being in the multidisciplinary design program as a professor, I am a very long-time resident of this institution, dating back into the 80s when we lived right down the street, starting as a student. I have a role as a senior associate dean in the Office of Undergraduate Studies and looking at academic innovation. And as part of that role, we are building as well as deploying a range of AI tools that are examining and with the effort of increasing student success here on campus. And then have the wonderful opportunity to work with a number of faculty and others in thinking about teaching and learning and the integration of AI, guidance, what we consider, the tools that we acquire, and work with the team on AI initiatives. So thank you.
Well, very relevant to AI. Now, last but certainly not least, we have Manish, Chief AI Officer.
Thank you, and thank you for organizing such an important event, right? It's so important that we have these conversations, and so I really appreciate your leadership and for all of you being here and for including us. Good afternoon. As mentioned, I'm Manish Parashar. I'm the Chief AI Officer. This is a role that the university established earlier this year, recognizing how important it is that we are very conscious as we move forward in AI. It's a technology we want to embrace and use to make the impact we want to do as a university, as academics. But we also have to be considerate about the ethical issues and balance different aspects of AI, right? So this role helps have those conversations. As Penny mentioned, I direct the Scientific Computing and Imaging Institute, which houses the Responsible AI Initiative, which is, again, seeing how do we leverage AI in a responsible way where we bring in the technical and the socio-technical aspects, the ethical aspects, as we try to address some of our most challenging issues using AI. So I'm happy to have this conversation, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Definitely incredibly relevant. We've had already several presentations that were based on the ethics of AI, so that'll be super interesting to hear about. Before we get started with the questions for the panel, I'd love to just do a quick exercise. Can we have a raising of hands in the room here of students? I just want to know the composition. Okay, cool. And then faculty. Okay, so a little bit more students and faculty, which is what we were going for. If I could just do one more exercise. So, we hear AI pretty much on a daily basis, I think all of us, right? And I think everyone kind of has their own emotions and feelings when it comes to this kind of stuff. So just feel free, if anyone has one word, to describe how they feel about AI or think about AI, maybe not even on an emotional level, but just logical level if you think about efficiency, right? Just feel free to shout out what comes to your mind when you think about AI. Okay, that's relevant to what you were saying earlier too. All right, anyone else? Cautious. Okay. Revolutionary. Okay. Perfect. Well, all, definitely 3 pillars. We've already gone in depth about, I think, all of those in a way, right? So incredibly important stuff. So I would just like to get started. So asking each of you, feel free, whoever wants to answer first, have at it. And then if you guys, again, I want to reiterate, can build off of each other. What's one thing that people misunderstand about AI currently from your perspective?
I'm happy to start, and I'm sure you'll have lots of thoughts about this too, but I feel like one thing that people misunderstand AI is they treat it as if it's a monolith, when it's really so many different tools, so many different deployments that have different ethical considerations, different, environmental considerations. And so I feel like any conversation around AI has to start off by really defining your terms. Like, are we talking about large language models? Are we talking about facial recognition software? Fill in the blank. And so I think that it's good for people to know AI isn't brand new, that it's been around for a long time, that the reason why we're seeing these great advances are because we have more compute and more data than we had in the past, and that when we talk about AI, we should hone in on the kind of AI that's really that conversation is pertinent to.
I was going to say pretty much the same thing, but I'll take another aspect of that on this idea that it's not a monolith. I think we heard the word cautious. I've done similar word cloud events or word cloud activities when asking audiences to just kind of see where they are with AI. And you always see this bubble around cautious and pessimism and really kind of the fear of what it might do for, say, future jobs, or kind of how a multitude of bias and ethical questions. On the other hand, you see a lot of optimism. There's so many opportunities for really great success, and I think that these two areas where we see amazing opportunities, but also a lot of cautious and like being careful with what we're doing, I think that those two things aren't separate. I think that in order to realize those really impactful things, that we need to combine some of that cautious optimism and really make it something where we take control of AI and make sure that we're doing so ethically and responsibly. And so kind of taking a different tone to this idea that there's multiple sides of it, but I think that they're really kind of combined.
I would say the history of it, this has been going on for a very long time. I think researchers in Manisha's area and Penny's area have been working on this activity and neural networks and other things for a very long time. They have had access to it. I think it has gotten scalable. The big advance was to put a user interface that was pretty easy for people to consume at mass. And so as a result of that, then it now has the ability to scale across our globe and be accessible by people. The other part of that, I think, is just thinking about the disparities that it can create. We've always talked about digital divide. And now we have digital tools that require immense amounts of power, money, access, and knowledge to use in a very interesting, forward way of using it. And I think we just need to be really thoughtful about who is accessing these tools and who is not. And how do we make sure that those that don't have computing resources, those that don't have the dollars to pay a $30 fee, or whatever it is per month, what those individuals are not participating in and sort of contributing to this whole work.
So I'm going to say yes and. It's always, right? So I think it's true. AI is a whole set of approaches. The one we are, which is really popular right now, is based on neural nets and deep neural nets, and more specifically generative AI, right? And sometimes you forget what the technology is, and the difference between what the technology is and how it is presented to us, right? The technology, at a fundamental level, you train it on everything that's ever created, right, in terms of digital knowledge, and then it probabilistically predicts, right, what it strings together words probabilistically, right? So in that sense, it is repeating to us things that we have already said in the past, right, over the many, many generations, right? So, and because it does this at such huge scales, right, none of us can hold everything that was ever written in our heads, right, but the models can. So it seems amazing to us. And then it is presented to us as these very attractive tools that are designed to keep our attention, right? And so when that happens, we give it more credit than it's due. And so I think keeping that in mind as you use it in all the ways, right? Caution was a great word. Assistant was a great word. Innovative is a great word. Yes, it's one of the most transformative technologies of our time, right? But I think keeping that reality in mind as we use it and apply it to whatever it is at hand is so important.
All incredible answers. I want to build off of something that Jim had said, and I want to ask, what does equitable AI look like to you guys? I think open access was maybe one answer for that, but I also want to hear all the others.
I'll jump in. I think it's really important to have everyone who is involved with the technology with it this day and age is really everyone in our community should have access and should have knowledge. And so I think part of it is both engaging with people across our community, not just those that we see at the University of Utah, but really across our state, across our nation, and across the world. There are so many people who don't necessarily have access to these things. And so there are opportunities to have access given cloud infrastructure. Obviously, you need some technology in order to engage with these models, but I think that really ensuring that as we're looking at how data is being used, that everyone whose data is being used in these models has the education to know that. And I think that that comes down to every single person across the globe, which is a no small feat. But I think what we can do is locally engage with those who aren't here in this room today. This may be your parents, your relatives, your neighbors, but I think helping to ensure that everyone that we engage with at least has the understanding of what AI is and how it might impact them. Without that general knowledge, I think that that has a huge opportunity, I guess, negative opportunity to leave people behind. And I think the best thing that we can do is just really engage with anyone and everyone about AI to try to share AI literacy as the first step, and then getting access, I think, is the next.
I have thoughts. I just wanted to give Manish a chance to go next since he got stuck last time. So by training, I'm a librarian. And before I worked in academic libraries, I've been here for 13 years, but before that, I was a librarian at a public library. And that really changes your perspective on equity and the digital divide, things that we just take for granted, thinking everybody has access to the internet, or even everyone has a home address. You start to realize when you work at a public library is absolutely not the case. And I think with these tools, it's so important, and I think the library will play a huge role of making sure people have access to tools. Right now, a lot of us are getting access to these tools for free, but I think in a lot of ways, it's because they're trying to build up their user base. And it's part of a curve, right? So right now, they're getting 100 million new users in the first 2 months, and they're trying to get us all on and have network effects and get that market share. At some point, we're all going to be paying for these tools. And when that happens, we want to make sure that everyone has access to them to make sure they can compete on an even playing field. And then just in the broader questions around equity, I do really worry about concentrations of wealth and power into the hands of few technical companies. That really concerns me, that it gets harder and harder for people to compete and to innovate. And so I hope whatever we can do to build policy that allows newcomers to keep entering, I think that's really important.
Again, yes, and. So I'll build on what Rebecca just said, right? I think, yes, we want everybody to have access to this technology and the ability, the knowledge, the awareness to be able to use it most effectively and most responsibly, right? But on the other side, right now, there's a handful of companies that can build these big models. And that's not a few things, right? Clearly, they will advance their goals, their objectives, profits, right? But it also doesn't require them to make sure those models are representative, right? And so how can we democratize the other end of the side? How can we make sure everybody, as many of us as possible, are able to contribute to the evolution of these models? Remember, what differentiates AI is it learns on how we use it, who's using it, what data we're putting in, and it's growing, it's evolving, right? So how do we make sure that we can be part of that ecosystem, right? And that means lowering the barriers, building awareness, providing infrastructure, and those are some of the things we're doing here as part of the Responsible AI Initiative.
It's incredibly important stuff. I want to talk about the durable skills. We had, I think, pretty much throughout this entire conference, right? We've been alluding to that, but I want it to be very clear as you guys define it. What are the durable skills when it comes to AI?
Jim, do you want to go first?
Sure. Curiosity. I think there's often a tendency, one way or another, to enter into a new technological revolution. When the internet came out, people were just like, I don't want anything to do with it, which is fine. And I think people can have those stances, and there are very good reasons why they might have those stances. But I think one of the durable skills is to be curious about the world in which we live in, which means that you engage in all sorts of activities and beat these things up, to try them out, to see where they don't work, where they do work. And that's something that, again, if you go out and, we'll all work in certain areas, that is an unbelievably valuable skill that many people don't have. And to be just constantly curious, investigating the world, seeing what fits and what doesn't, for your particular vantage point and others, and make yourself uncomfortable. It's like, well, I'm going to try to write a paper with ChatGPT. Cool, that took you 20 seconds to write a prompt, and now you've written a paper. Now read it, and it's like, that kind of okay, but not really. So I think that's one. The other one is in the curiosity, to be very questioning, not necessarily always skeptical, but always look at something past its face value. I would say the same thing that students come in my classroom. It's like, I am one human. I have a particular belief system. I have a particular past. I can give you my viewpoint. It is one viewpoint. You all have others. So please question what I'm saying. Challenge the assumptions that I'm putting out there, and challenge the models that we're saying are foundational to our world. Like, someone has determined that. And so please, go forth and really wrestle with those and question them, and make sure that they fit in your particular context for the work you do.
I really appreciate the use of the term durable skill, or like flexible skill, because for years and years and years, we referred to things like being good communicators as a soft skill. And I think that didn't give it the credit that it deserved. Like, there are skills that you can gain, especially in the humanities, which is, my area of campus, like reading and writing and thinking and asking the right questions and learning how to really evaluate the results that are coming out of these models, and learning how to, ask the right questions about what kind of data is going into them, doing that investigative thinking, being curious, like Jim said, being a lifelong learner, because these tools are going to change every few years. These are the skills I think that employers are looking for. If you are just doing the basic things that ChatGPT can do, basic writing, basic coding, there's not going to be a place for you in this workforce. You need to bring what makes you uniquely human, your human judgment, your ability to connect and to evaluate and curate. And those, I think, are the durable skills that are going to matter when you're finding a place in an increasingly competitive workforce. And for me, it makes me feel good about what people are learning on the humanities side of campus, although I know they're learning those all over campus as well.
No, I agree completely, right? I think this is an assistant enabler. It allows you to be more curious, more creative, more inspired, think more critically, right? It allows you to do more. So it's something you can build on, right? And so I think focusing on those skills, right, and being able to use this as a way to accelerate, to amplify your creativity, amplify your innovative, your critical thinking, your curiosity, I think that would be my thinking, yeah.
And I don't know that there's a lot to add, but I think the one gap that I am kind of seeing is what it's not, or like what we need to ensure that we're not doing with AI, and I think is taking everything that is created through your generative AI chat and taking that at face value. I think it's so important that we are really making sure that we're using it to amplify ourselves and not substitute ourselves. And so I think that's was said very much by all three of you, but I think just saying it explicitly is key too.
Can I just add something? So I'm trained as an architect, and part of the great education that I received was that everything is iterative, and that to focus on the process more. So something that Manish was saying sort of triggered the thought that to see all of the activity as you engage these tools as an iteration, and that iteration is actually a deep cognitive ability to try, assess, try it again, move it forward, and amplify the stuff that we're doing, that you already have in your head, and that it becomes less of a vending machine where you're looking at the results and it's like, great, I'm just going to turn that in. It's like, okay, you may turn it in, but it is not finished. It is an iteration that was done based on the particular context and the prompts that you gave it, without some, like really, you need to continue to wrestle with it. And I think if you continue to do that, like the cognitive ability just increases at being able to amplify your work.
Okay, I want to build off of something that Rebecca had said. All of that was great. We talked about employers. And so, the UK had done a study. 92% of undergraduates internationally are using AI now. So undeniably, AI is not something in the future. It's already here. Students are already using it. Employers are really soon, if not already, going to be actively seeking students that are at least competent within AI. And maybe we can kind of talk about these, these thresholds about what AI is, the potential of AI, and then what AI is actually going to do, and that difference we might call a bubble. But undeniably, AI is here. And so I would just ask, from the educational standpoint, what can the school do to better prepare students for basic AI competencies that are going to be expected of them post-graduation?
I think first is being aware of the technology and the tools that are part of our everyday work, right? So you have AI tools that are permeating almost everything we do. So having a skill set on how to most effectively use them, I think that's just the base, right? And understanding technology. But I think more importantly, understanding how do I think with AI, right? I mean, how do I use this to do what I do better? And Penny said it really well, not to substitute what I do, but to improve what I do, right? So if I'm doing a writing course, or if I'm doing an engineering course, right? How having this technology accessible to me, how do I do a better job on my project? In my research report, how do I become more creative? Because now I can search through everything that was written and be able to create from it, right? So how do I do what I do much better, more creatively, because I have access to that technology, right? So that critical thinking is so important. Right? That's what's going to differentiate you when you go into the job market, right? Everybody is going to know mostly how to use the tools, but how do you use them effectively to do what you do much better? And I think that's where the differentiator is.
Yeah, I would agree with that differentiator, and I think the university's role, and thanks to Manish and the hard work of lots of folks across campus, providing tools to our students, our faculty, and our staff to make sure that they have the tools to explore in a safe environment, so that you have the guardrails provided by an enterprise license to be able to, ensure that you can experiment and understand the tool, because it is going to be really critical to know when it's useful to use AI and when it's not, because it's not always the best choice. But I think you have to experiment in order to understand where that is. And so I think the best thing is to provide that canvas for students to be able to do that.
I have so many thoughts about this, and I feel like it ties really well into a conversation we were having at my table right over here when someone said that they are having to code on paper in their classes to make sure that they're not cheating. I see a few other heads nodding, so apparently this isn't just a thing with like blue books and writing essays inside of the classroom. And my question for him was, well, when you enter the workforce, your employers expect you to use AI and to work with these tools. And it's definitely been a conundrum for faculty of how should we be teaching with AI? Should we be walling you off from the tools to make sure you're feeling all that necessary friction to learn things the way that we learned them? Or should we be providing the tools and giving guidance and giving clarity? And I'm sure as students, you have maybe been seeing both in your classrooms, and it has to be really hard to know like when you can use AI and when you shouldn't use AI. And so I apologize you're in this weird moment of flux, but I do think one thing we need to do right now is just put a lot of funding into figuring out how we can teach most effectively with artificial intelligence, because there's a huge gap right now on the part of educators of knowing how we can bring AI into the classrooms to make sure that you're learning how to co-pilot effectively with AI, that you have clarity on what's a good use of AI and what maybe is just a shortcut, which these conversations will keep going. But I do think it's a responsibility of the university to prepare our students for a future workforce. And so it's also really important to teach them how to think without it. But I don't think we're doing the best job right now of making sure that day one they're using AI efficiently in their jobs. But we're trying.
I think it's the university's responsibility to give you all a variety of viewpoints. I think if all of us ran with, and I am clearly in like running full force with AI. But what I appreciate is I have colleagues that sit there and say, did you think about privacy? Did you think about, I had no idea, thank you. And I think that's what we have to do, and what the tradition is of the academy, is to really look at these things from a variety of perspectives, to give you all a variety of perspectives so that you have the tools as you leave here to really think what works well for you, and to be able to look at it in a variety of different perspectives. So if you go work for a company where you are developing and have a general knowledge of AI, and you are helping them do some prompt engineering to improve their business processes, amazing. But then you also, in the back of your head, it's like, well, there are a lot of dimensions to this. There are energy consumption issues. There are other things. And not that they necessarily stop you in your tracks where you then are immobile and you can't do anything and conflicted. It's just like, I see the implications of this stuff in the world in a much broader viewpoint than maybe when I started. And so I really see those places, and you may disagree as a student, I see those places in our colleagues that put a blue book in front of you and have you write, to see that as an opportunity. And to see it as an opportunity to challenge the assumptions that are being presented to you that this is the solution that will solve all of man, women's ills. It is but a tool.
I'm just going to add what Jim said triggered a thought, right? So I think it's early days. This is still evolving. It's faculty, students, processes, curriculum, all of it's evolving quickly to incorporate this technology, right? And as we, at a high level, what we're thinking is we definitely want to make you aware of what you could do with AI. Also, equip you with the skills on how to do this with AI. But if you're successful, we also allow you to answer the question, should I do this with AI? Is this the right thing to do, right? And we're not there yet, but that's what we're trying to do here.
Well, I, for one, I'm sure I'm not alone. I definitely really appreciate the equitability standpoint that we have and how we're approaching this conversation with that. Now, this is an incredibly smart panel. I feel incredibly lucky to just be able to listen to you guys, but I would like to acknowledge just maybe one limitation if I could, and that is that all of you are incredibly pro AI, use it within all of your job titles, and we're pushing that forward. So maybe just how would you talk to a professor that's maybe worried about job displacement, doesn't want AI, thinks that it might rob students of academic integrity, thinks that it might rob them of their learning? How would you pitch this to that student? Also, if I could add, if we do this again, I think that would be a cool. Yeah, please.
I want to amplify something that Jim said because it reminds me of something I was just reading about. There was a great book talking about AI in higher education, and they created this distinction between what they called like people who play the role of prophets and priests. And the priests in institutions were meant to like maintain the status quo, and the prophets are always like looking off to the new horizon. And the idea that was really brought out in the book was like, we need both, which is exactly what Jim just said. So I think it is important to say we shouldn't discount those professors who are like, I don't want to use this. I don't think this is the right tool. And it is important also that we do have a lot of different deployments of AI in the classroom and figuring out, is this a good use for AI? I also love what Manish just said, that we need to think about what does AI do really well? What kind of mundane intellectual labor can it take over? And what is not a good use for AI? I mean, we're seeing a lot of, just for example, like companion chatbots. And I think it's worth taking that step back and asking ourselves, is loneliness a good problem for AI to solve? And when we think about it in the abstract, I think a lot of us can say, no, loneliness is a social problem that requires a social solution, and maybe we should figure out ways to bring people together, or to create systems where people aren't feeling so alienated. It also, I feel like there's a little irony there that technology caused a lot of the loneliness epidemic, and now it's positioning itself as the solution to the loneliness epidemic. And these are the big ethical questions that, avail yourself of while you're here at the university and think about, because I think these are the important questions for deciding our AI future.
And I completely agree that it's not all roses, right? There's a reason we are calling it the responsible AI initiative. We do see the tremendous potential of AI to address many, many challenges, it provides so many opportunities, right? But we have to use it in a responsible way, understanding the consequences, the negative aspects of it, right? And I think in terms of job displacement, I think there is going to be a transition, right? And I do think that as we evolve in the technology, we'll have a redefinition of jobs and skills. And that transition is not going to be easy, right? But I think the opportunity, the reason I am positive is because I see opportunity to do things we couldn't do before. But again, I also feel we have to be cautious, we have to be responsible, and we have to bring everybody else with us as we go through this transition and adopt this technology. And the other point I'll make is we're in early days with the technology itself, right? We have generative AI, and we're quickly seeing that we're reaching the limits of generative AI, right? And if you read recent press from Jan LeCun, who left Meta, saying that, look, LLMs have reached their peak. We have to be thinking beyond it, right? And we have to see what the next technology and how we do that better, right? This is, in my mind, a brute force way of doing AI with these LLMs, right? I think we'll find smarter ways. So that's evolving too, and we have to sort of give it a chance to evolve and address some of these shortcomings as we move forward.
If I remember, you were saying, what would I do, and if I encountered a colleague who's teaching, maybe, can you?
Business law.
Business law,
They
and
don't
they're
like
not
AI.
using AI?
They don't like AI, no.
Yeah, okay. Just a really quick story. So studying architecture, I went through the transformation of hand drawing to digital drawing. And it was back in the early 90s, and it was a transition. We had big tables, we did everything by hand, amazing. And all of a sudden, then we start getting digital CAD tools, and I go over to Center for High Performance Computing and meet an old-time faculty member who ran the lab and started using some of these tools and started generating hundreds of drawings in a night. It was amazing. I'd make a little tweak and print this out. So I would come into class with a pile of drawings that I printed out, and the faculty member, Kazuo Matsubayashi, I remember him very well, he was like, you can't do this. And it just struck me as something that was really interesting, and I think we're in this sort of world right now. You can't do that. There is something foundational in this act of drawing that you are short-circuiting, and you are not learning the right skill. And in being in that, I was like, I have no idea what you are talking about. I don't know what it means, the value that I'm getting to make sure that all my lines are crossed and that they have, there's perfection in it. it wasn't only till later, as I got a little bit more mature, it's like, oh, that process actually taught me something about my thinking and how to be precise, how to be rigorous, and when not to be. And so then we had a discussion about the difference of my printed drawings versus my hand. It's like, I see the difference. And so I don't know if that specifically addresses your business law class, but I think there is something in that. I don't know exactly what it is, but I think that wrestling with that tension is really valuable. And we're constantly being, we constantly see that. And I guess the flexibility of thought, there are old timers like me that, can tend to just like, no, this is the right way. And it's like, well, that's not the right way either. Like, there are more than one way to do it than I do it. So I think having the flexibility and being able to move back and forth between and seeing the value between those is really important.
Sorry, could I maybe try to repeat what you're saying back to you, and then you could poke holes in it? Is that okay?
Sure.
And then,
sounds like a good prompt for a chat GPT.
Yeah, exactly, right?
That's what I use it.
But yeah, so also I want to be mindful of the time. I definitely want to hear from both of you guys. I saw some hands go up there. We're going to have about 3-4 questions. We'll have time for 3 or 4. But to your point about, I'm not taking business law, right? But I know friends and I've talked to professors, Jeff Nielsen, who have very colorful language about AI in their classroom, right? And something interesting that I relate to listening to you is over the summer, I had tried my hand at acrylic painting for the very first time. I used AI to help me learn to buy utensils and acrylic paint. And I felt like super proud of the final product that I had. I was showing it to everyone. Then I showed it to my Aunt Janice, who is a professional painter. And she took one look at it and she told me that I should start over because I'd missed some fundamental steps because I completely outsourced to AI, right? And how could I know what I was, not doing if I had never done? I didn't even know what I should learn because I wasn't, in that realm. So I think it's fair to say AI can accelerate learning, but it's no substitute for expertise.
And I think in your story, the great example is what you should do first is probably call out Aunt Janice and say, hey, you're a professional painter. We have a personal relationship. How would you do this instead of going to AI? So I think that there's good examples of, when looking back, it's like, yes, AI might be an easy answer because you don't have to make a phone call or reach out to someone who you might not want to. But often those personal relationships are so critical, and you can learn with AI with personal relationships as well. So I think great example though.
Can I just add, I doubt, it could be totally wrong, so in 50 years when this happens to you all, you can correct me. But I doubt that we are going to go to our grave saying, wow, I really missed my AI bot. I didn't have a connection. And to Penny's point, like the humanness and the beautiful interactions that we have with other human beings, I don't think is going to change. In fact, it may get actually more acute, and we may seek it out more because we're living in this weird artificial world. And it's just like, oh my God, I see people that I've interacted with for 20 years, and you know what I mean? And you have this interaction with your aunt, and I think that that's just going to get even stronger.
I think it's early days. I think one thing your story highlights is the discovery process, the learning process that we go through as we discover and learn more and fail and then go, right? So somehow AI can be used to shortcut that process, and that's when we lose, right? So I think we are trying to figure out how do we most effectively use it as part of our discovery process. And going back to Jim's thing, I have my funny story as well, and I'm dating myself, but when I was in engineering school, we were not allowed to use calculators because that's going to destroy your brain, right? It's not, you're going to lose the skills. How can you be an engineer if you are using a calculator, right?
And look at you now, you survived.
Yeah. So, things change, and I think we learn, and we learn to use them more effectively as we evolve as humans. But the transition is always is somewhere we have to be careful and do that in a very thoughtful way. And I think what we're trying to do here at the U is to make sure that you are aware of what the opportunities are, what the tools are, and how to use them, and be able to think whether to use them or not to use them, right, as you go through your journeys.
Beautiful answer. Well, I could genuinely talk to you guys, shoot 1,000 questions out. But speaking of open access, I think we should hear from the crowd. So the way that I'm going to tweak this a little bit, because I ate into our time, if we could have people line up over here at the mic, and instead of asking your question at the entire panel, if you could pick just one person to ask your question to, that way we could get through some more questions and everyone has an opportunity here to speak. So if we could just start lining up over there, that would be awesome, if you have questions.
While we're waiting for people to line up, I also want to highlight that I also did hand drawings in engineering school in the late 2000 aughts. What is it? The early 2010s, let's say that. So it didn't die.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. I wanted to ask this question to Manish. So I'm in CS, and a lot of students in this room are in CS. So what do we do as students to convince professors that we're in that flux that Rebecca mentioned, and we need help because we need to be able to use AI in our future jobs, but college isn't even letting us use AI in our classes. So what can we do as students to bring about that change?
I would talk to faculty. As I said, we are going through this transition with you, right? We are learning as well, and we are trying to learn how to teach with AI in the presence of AI, right? And as faculty get more, what's the right word? Experienced, it's harder for them to adapt to change, right? So I think having those conversations and making it, that this is the reason, this is how, I think we can together make that transition.
Okay, thank you.
And just really quick, a good academic argument that's backed up by peer review and other things as you go to these folks always helps, right? You sort of use the tools that you have and the world that we exist in to make an argument of why it should be useful. Often accelerates the conversation and helps folks like, great, I still don't want you to do it, but I get your point, and thank you very much for coming to me.
Yeah, and then my question is for Manish as well. You mentioned us reaching the limits of generative AI, and I was wondering if you could elaborate on that. Like, do you mean by that technical limitations as far as proficiency, or more like ethical basis where it doesn't have, a moral framework to base its decisions off of?
I think we will continue to build applications on top of the current platforms, but the technology evolves as it learns more. And increasingly, the data that we are feeding it is AI-generated data, right? So that's not improving its ability to understand and to be able to generate these responses, right? So in that sense, right, we can build new applications on top of it, but technology itself, scale or additional data is not improving its ability to do things, right? So we have to figure out one way, for example, people are thinking about, okay, if I build it across many modalities, right, it's not just text data, I put images and I'm able to think across all of these things in my model. That's one way. Neurosymbolic AI, where you start bringing causal information, symbolic information, as well as text information. There are different ways people are looking to build new approaches to extend the technology beyond just deep neural nets and generative transformers.
Good, thank you.
Hi, so I'm just wondering, how do you guys think we should be thinking about artificial intelligence right now? Obviously, there's been transformative technologies in the past, like the internet or calculators or Google Translate. You can probably insert any new technology there. And there's been, it's turned out that those technologies are, incremental progress, right? Rather than being a step function, like difference in kind of technology. So should we be thinking about artificial intelligence in the same way, or is it something different, something fundamentally different?
So it is sorry.
No, go for it.
It is a technology, but it's different in ways, in the fact that it's able to learn and then act based on what it learns from that, right? So those things make it different. All technologies provide additional capability, but the ability to act was something that the human had, right? This technology is able to learn from how you interact with it and then act based on that learning, right? And that's what differentiates this, in my mind, from other technologies that we have had so far. Thank you.
Do you mind if I say a word about that too? So I'm saying pretty much exactly what you're saying, maybe in a slightly different way though, because one way it was explained to me is that when we would make an advancement in something like robotics, robotics would shoot up. Or we'd make an advancement in genetics, and genetics would shoot up. You know, think of all the different areas of science. But when you have more intelligence, all those things can rise at the same time, and that's why this has the ability to be more transformative than other technologies that came before it. That helped me sort of think of why it was a bigger deal maybe than other things.
I was actually kind of thinking about it as you mentioned that AI is a step function versus other technologies not. I was trying to think back to like the printing press and really the ability to like mass print information and share that across the world. I was trying to think the impact there seems huge. Whereas obviously the impact of AI is big, but I think so much of it is context in terms of what we're used to. But I do think that there will continue to probably see developments at a faster and faster rate just due to technology and the abilities that everyone's working on these various technologies together, our ability to share information. So I think we'll continue to see these very vast improvements, but I think it's also good to think about it kind of in a historical context as well.
So I'd like to add on that too. My bad, sorry. Well, I think, ideas are incredibly beautiful, right? Because unlike, physical commodities, if you have an apple, I have an orange, we exchange that. If we, I now have an apple, you have an orange, but we lose the other. With ideas, we exchange ideas, we have a compound, where now you have 2 ideas, I have 2 ideas. We had the NVIDIA guy over here earlier, and he asked us what the #1 commodity is. And somebody over here, really smart, stoic, said ideas was the #1. And that got shot down, unfortunately. But I appreciate you, helping validate that.
My question to all of you guys is, what is your opinion on developing boundaries with AI? Like, how would we know that we're relying a little too much on AI when we should not be?
Just for clarity, do you mean personal boundaries or like societal boundaries?
I guess a mix of both.
I was going to mention earlier, those shift based on the technology, the context that we're in, how wealth is distributed, how power is distributed. And so I think we're in a place where perhaps, and it's happened throughout time, you think of certain industrial activities and modernization activities. The technology far outstrips our ability to contain and control, and then wealth is centralized in huge areas. There's lots of abuse, and then there are policies and practices that get put in place to control that. I think that the difference is that stuff took years. This is taking months. And so, but at some point, our systems and our government policy makers and other things will start to shift that so that there'll be some policies in places to put some boundaries on this. It's just what occurs. We see abuses, and we as humans want fairness. We start putting policies in place that, and then there's a tussle over what's fair, and and then we move forward on to the next shift.
Thank you.
If you'll indulge a non-student question, is that okay?
Oh, of course, faculty, anyone. I should have
I'm a
clarified.
community member, but I'm going to grill a professor. So does that
Totally
work?
fine. Totally fine.
So this question's for Jim. So a little bit of a practical, my understanding of how you might use the tool in education, because you're architecture, maybe urban planning is what you might teach. If you were to ask a question, design me the perfect building for this purpose or the perfect city for these criteria, and you get an answer, and let's say, is it always going to be an A answer, or are you going to maybe not always get the A answer? And then secondly, would you ask your students to criticize it and grade it and maybe say why they aren't going to give it an A?
Yeah, I could go on and on about the power of design and the power of critique and how we teach. So in that particular case, if someone came up and said, I have this particular solution, they might use the words characterized as like perfect or something. It's like, what is perfect? I mean, part of the design world is you are trying to create a best fit for the context that it is in, right? We've done modernism, we've done a lot of that and discovered that you just can't replicate design solutions across the entire world, and because it's not contextually fit. So typically it would be like, you tell me how this is perfect, right? It's always following with questions and really getting people to think deeply about the design intentions that they made. Like, why did you put the wall here? Why did you put the windows here? Why did you do this? And what is that telling you about your beliefs and the beliefs of the individuals that you are designing for? And how does it fit into this broader context? So we always try to think about scale jumping and always think like, okay, this has this place in here. It sits in a room, it sits in a building, it sits on a campus, it sits in a city, it sits in a state, it sits in a country, and all of those things have layered perspectives that you have to wrestle with. And it's like, I honestly don't care what you end up with. It's how you wrestle with that ambiguity and that difficulty navigating context. And so that's an A. If you just produced a beautiful artifact, it's like, that tells me nothing, right? The artifact is not the problem. And the process is the problem.
Okay, awesome. What's your name, man? Andre. Andre, cool. Everyone, please join me in a drum roll for Andre. He's going to be our last question. No pressure, but everyone's looking at you. And if we could limit our response to just 30 seconds because I have to wrap up and be respectful of my colleagues here. So, full pressure. Everyone's looking at you.
You're taking my time. This question is for Penny. Just wondering about AI-generated data and when to use it, when not to use it. How has that influenced research, if you've seen that at all?
Yeah, I think the question in terms of like AI-generated data, I think could mean a lot of things. Are you thinking about like, say something that's coming out of a generative AI model, or?
Well, you can generate data through AI, like responses. If it's, depending on what kind of research you're doing. So I know people do that. I was wondering if you had any insights, if you've seen any people trying that, and
Yeah, I think it goes really back to what Jim was saying around the design process. Like if you are using an output from an LLM to, try to submit as a homework assignment, I think obviously there's some issues there, but you should be thinking about whether or not what you would create and how you would iterate on that. But I think in terms of the research, like using that data directly for research, I think there is research in terms of what's coming out of LLMs, but I think in terms of being able to leverage something that comes directly, I think there's this iterative process. I think that we need to really evaluate what the data is and where it's coming from. And so much of that comes back to this design process, understanding your data, ensuring that you're doing the right thing and moving forward with data that you trust. And so much of it is also validation of what's coming out of that. We often call this the human in the loop. So making sure that whatever is being generated is something that's being checked or validated by someone with expertise. And in the acrylic paint example, it does require that someone has expertise about acrylic paint to know whether or not you had all the steps, because what you created was a finished product. But if you don't have that expertise, you might not have known that.
Thank you.
Beautiful answer. They all were beautiful answers. That's going to be our time. Please join me in a huge round of applause. Truly, thank you guys so much for being here. It means a lot. These conversations are incredible. Super important too. So now we're going to move on to the next thing, which is going to be student presentations. You have about 7 minutes to use the restroom. And then, yeah, we look forward to seeing you guys here in 7 minutes.